I was standing in my driveway watching the propane delivery truck pull away when Brenda Carmichael came storming across the street like a hurricane in designer athleisure. Where? Her highlighted blonde bob bouncing with each angry step. My hands were frozen from helping guide the driver, and all I wanted was to get back inside my house in Stowe, Vermont, but clearly that was not going to happen. "Excuse me, Isaac Young," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Did I just see a commercial vehicle in your driveway?" I looked at her, then at the truck disappearing down Maple Ridge Lane, then back at her. "Yeah, that was my propane delivery. They come every 6 weeks or so to fill the tank." Her face turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pink fleece jacket. "Absolutely not. That is a direct violation of Pinewood Estates HOA regulations, Section 12, subsection 4. Commercial vehicles are not permitted on residential driveways." "It is a propane delivery truck," I said slowly, like I was explaining something to a child. "I need propane to heat my house. You know, because we live in Vermont where it gets cold." "I do not care if you need it to power a spaceship," Brenda said, pulling out her phone and jabbing at it with one manicured finger. "Rules are rules. I am documenting this violation and you will be receiving a formal notice." This was my first winter in Pinewood Estates, and I was already regretting the decision to buy here. The subdivision was only 3 years old, a collection of expensive homes carved out of the mountainside with stunning views and equally stunning HOA fees. My wife, Olivia Anderson, and I had moved here from Boston 6 months ago when I started working remotely as a software engineer. She loved the community feel, the walking trails, the planned events. I loved the peace and quiet in my heated garage workshop. "Brenda, be reasonable," I said. "How else am I supposed to get propane?" "That is not my problem," she said without looking up from her phone. "You should have considered that before purchasing a home with propane heat. Perhaps you can have it delivered when the truck is not visible, or you can make other arrangements." "Other arrangements? What other arrangements? The propane does not magically appear in my tank." She finally looked up, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Again, not my problem. The HOA board will be discussing this at our meeting next week. Until then, I am formally notifying you that any future commercial vehicle violations will result in fines of $500 per incident." She turned and marched back across the street to her own house, leaving me standing there in the cold wondering how my life had come to this. I went inside and found Olivia in the kitchen making coffee. "Let me guess," she said when she saw my face. "Brenda, she is threatening to fine me $500 every time the propane truck comes." Olivia sighed and handed me a mug. "She is just power hungry. Remember when she tried to fine the Hendersons because their Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white? This is different. We actually need propane to heat the house. It is not a decorative choice. Talk to the other board members." Brenda is the HOA president, but she cannot make all the decisions herself. That sounded reasonable, so after warming up with the coffee, I spent the rest of the morning making calls. The problem was that the other 4 board members all seemed to defer to Brenda on everything. Martin Fletcher, the vice president, actually laughed when I explained the situation. "Look, Isaac, I hear you," he said, "but Brenda is very particular about maintaining property values. If we start allowing commercial vehicles, next thing you know people will have moving trucks parked in their driveways for days." "A propane delivery takes 20 minutes, max," I argued. "It is not like I am running a business out of my house." "I will bring it up at the meeting," Martin said in a tone that made it clear he would do no such thing. The formal violation notice arrived in my mailbox 3 days later, printed on expensive letterhead with the Pinewood Estates logo. It detailed my infraction, cited the relevant HOA regulation, and warned that future violations would result in the $500 fine Brenda had threatened. It also helpfully noted that accumulated fines could result in a lien being placed on my property. I showed it to Olivia that evening. She read it twice, her expression growing darker each time. "This is insane," she said. "How are they expecting people to live? Apparently, I am supposed to figure out a way to heat my house without having a delivery truck visible from the street. What if you park your truck in the driveway to block the view of the propane truck?" I had considered that. "The propane tank is on the side of the house. They need to back up to it." My truck would not block anything, and honestly, I am pretty sure they would just find something else to complain about. "What about the Mercers? They have propane too, do they not?" She was right. Tom and Linda Mercer lived 4 houses down, and I had seen a propane tank behind their house. I walked over there after dinner and knocked on their door. Tom answered, a tall guy in his 50s with gray hair and a friendly smile. "Isaac, hey, come on in. Cold one tonight." I stepped into his warm foyer and explained the situation. Tom's smile faded. "Yeah, I got the same notice about a year ago," he said. "Brenda had a fit about the delivery truck. I ended up having to switch to a smaller company that comes really early in the morning, like 5 a.m., before most people are awake. Costs me an extra 40%, but it was either that or the fines. You are paying 40% more just to avoid being seen." "Welcome to Pinewood Estates," Tom said with a shrug. "I tried fighting it at first, but Brenda got the whole board to back her up. They can make your life miserable if you do not comply." I left Tom's house feeling defeated. 40% more for propane delivery was ridiculous, but so was paying $500 fines. When I got home, I found a business card for the small delivery company Tom used and called them the next morning. The woman who answered sounded apologetic. "I am sorry, but we are completely booked for early morning deliveries. We have a wait list about 6 months long." A lot of HOAs in the area have similar restrictions. 6 months. My current tank would be empty in about 5 weeks. I called my regular propane company and explained the situation to the dispatcher. "We cannot do 5 m deliveries," she said. "Our drivers start at 7, and we have too many customers to accommodate special requests like that. If your HOA is preventing delivery, you might need to consider switching to a different heating system." Switching heating systems. In the middle of winter. "Do you know how expensive that would be?" "I am sorry, sir. I am just letting you know your options." I hung up and immediately called a lawyer. If the HOA was going to play hardball, so was I. The attorney, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in property law, listened to my story and then gave me the bad news. "Unfortunately, HOAs have broad authority to enforce their regulations," she said. "If the restriction on commercial vehicles was in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions you signed when you bought the house, you agreed to follow it." "But it is for essential services," I protested. "Heat is not optional in Vermont." "I understand, but legally, the HOA can argue that there are alternatives, like switching heating systems or using the early morning delivery service. Unless you can prove the rule is being applied discriminatorily or that it violates some other law, you do not have much recourse." "So I am just supposed to pay them $500 every 6 weeks, or comply with their requirements?" "I am sorry. I know that is not what you want to hear. You could try requesting a variance or an exception at the HOA meeting." I thanked her and hung up, feeling even worse. Olivia was working from home that day, and when I told her what the lawyer said, she looked as frustrated as I felt. "This is ridiculous," she said. We cannot afford an extra $3,000 a year in fines or in delivery fees. I know. I am going to that HOA meeting, and I am going to make them see reason. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I showed up at 6:50 and found about 30 other residents already there, sitting in folding chairs facing a table where Brenda and the other 4 board members sat like judges. Brenda saw me come in, and her expression tightened. The meeting started with routine business. Minutes from the last meeting, financial reports, discussion about repainting the community sign. It was all incredibly boring until we got to new business and Brenda looked directly at me. "We have a resident who has been violating our commercial vehicle policy," she announced. Isaac Young has been allowing propane delivery trucks in his driveway during daylight hours, in clear violation of Section 12, subsection 4 of our regulations. I stood up. "I would like to address that." Brenda looked like she wanted to refuse, but Martin gestured for me to continue. "I need propane to heat my home," I said, looking around at the other residents. "The delivery truck is here for maybe 20 minutes every 6 weeks. It is not like I am parking a semi in my driveway. This is essential home maintenance, the same as if I had an oil delivery or a septic service." "The rule applies to all commercial vehicles," Brenda said. "We cannot make exceptions or everyone will want one." "What about postal trucks, garbage trucks? Those are commercial vehicles." "Those are municipal services," Brenda countered. "Completely different." "Actually, the Postal Service is federal and my garbage collection is through a private company," I said. "So by your logic, I should be fined every time the garbage truck comes too." A few people in the audience murmured in agreement. Brenda's face was turning red again. "You are being deliberately obtuse," she snapped. "The intent of the rule is to prevent unsightly commercial vehicles from lowering property values. A propane delivery truck is here for 20 minutes 6 times a year. How exactly does that lower property values?" "It sets a precedent," Brenda said. "If we allow propane trucks, then we have to allow oil trucks, septic trucks, pool maintenance trucks, landscaping trucks. Before you know it, this place will look like a commercial district." "Most people already have landscaping trucks," someone called out from the audience. "That is different," Brenda said, but she was clearly flustered. "Those are by appointment and scheduled in advance." "So is propane delivery," I said. "I get a call the day before confirming the time." Martin cleared his throat. "Isaac, I understand your frustration, but Brenda has a point. We need to maintain standards here. What if you had the delivery scheduled for very early in the morning before most people are awake?" "The company that does early morning deliveries is booked solid for 6 months and charges 40% more," I said. "Why should I have to pay thousands of extra dollars a year for something that is a basic necessity?" "Perhaps you should have considered that before buying a home with propane heat," Brenda said coldly. "I did consider it. I looked at the HOA rules before buying. Do you know what Section 12, subsection 4 actually says? It says commercial vehicles shall not be parked or stored on residential property. Parked or stored. A delivery truck that is here for 20 minutes is not parked or stored. It is making a delivery." That caused more murmuring in the audience. Brenda looked at the other board members, clearly not expecting me to have actually read the rule that closely. "The intent is clear," she said. "The wording is what matters legally," I countered. "The rule is about parking and storage, not temporary deliveries." Linda Mercer, one of the board members and Tom's wife, spoke up for the first time. "He has a point, Brenda. The rule does specifically say parked or stored. We have always interpreted it to include deliveries," Brenda insisted. "That does not make it right," I said. and it is not applied consistently. Like I said, we all get landscaping deliveries, pool maintenance, and no one gets fined for those. Brenda stood up, her hands flat on the table. This board will vote on whether to grant you an exception to the rule. All in favor of allowing Mr. Young to continue having propane delivered during normal business hours. Linda raised her hand immediately. Martin hesitated, then did the same. The other two board members, Patricia Walsh and David Kim, looked at Brenda nervously and kept their hands down. The motion fails, Brenda announced. 3 votes are required for any exception. Mr. Young, you are hereby notified that any future deliveries in violation of HOA regulations will result in a $500 fine per occurrence. This meeting is adjourned. People started filing out, several stopping to tell me they thought the rule was stupid. Tom Mercer patted my shoulder. I tried too, he said. She is immovable on this. I drove home furious. Olivia was waiting up and I told her what happened. 2 votes out of 5 is not enough, I said. And Brenda is never going to change her mind. She would rather I freeze than admit she is wrong. What are we going to do? I am going to have the propane delivered anyway, I said. And I am not paying the fines. Let her try to enforce it. Isaac, they can put a lien on the house. Not without taking me to court first. And I am betting that when a judge hears that the HOA is trying to prevent me from heating my home, they are going to side with me. It was a gamble, but I was out of options. My next propane delivery was scheduled for 4 weeks out in mid-January. Vermont weather was getting colder, and I was going through propane faster than expected. I called the company and moved the delivery up a week. The truck arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I had my phone ready to document everything, and sure enough, within 10 minutes of the truck pulling into my driveway, Brenda was there with her phone out taking pictures. "You are making a big mistake," she called out to me. "No, you are," I called back. "This is essential home heating. No judge is going to uphold a fine for this." The delivery driver, a guy in his 30s named Mike, looked nervous. "I do not want to cause problems, man." "You are not causing problems," I assured him. "Just do your job. This is between me and the HOA." He finished the delivery in 15 minutes and left. I went inside, expecting the fine notice to arrive within days. It came the next morning, another piece of fancy letterhead informing me that I owed the Pinewood Estates HOA $500. Payable within 30 days. I threw it in a drawer and ignored it. Life went on. The holidays came and went. Olivia and I hosted her family for Christmas, and everything was fine until her mother asked about the propane situation. When I explained it, she looked horrified. "They cannot do that," she said. "That is discrimination or something." "HOAs can do pretty much whatever they want," I said, "as long as it is in their rules. But you said the rule was about parking and storage, not deliveries." That is what I argued. They did not care. January turned brutally cold. The weather reports were predicting a major winter storm, one of those nor'easters that can dump 3 feet of snow and shut down the entire region for days. I checked my propane levels and realized I was going to need another delivery before the storm hit. I was only at 20%, which might last a week in normal weather but would not be enough if we got hit hard and temperatures dropped into the single digits. I called the propane company and explained the urgency. They scheduled a delivery for that Friday, 2 days before the storm was supposed to arrive. I also called Sarah Chen, my lawyer, and gave her a heads up that I was probably going to need her soon. "Are you sure you want to push this?" she asked. "HOA disputes can get ugly." "I am sure." They are being unreasonable and I am not backing down. Friday arrived clear and cold, the kind of day where the air hurts your face. The propane truck pulled up at 2 p.m. and I went out to meet the driver. It was Mike again. "Big storm coming," he said. "Good thing you called when you did. We are completely booked tomorrow and we will not be running on Sunday when the storm hits." "Yeah, I am glad I caught you. Thanks for fitting me in." He hooked up the hose and started the fill. I was standing there watching when Brenda came marching over, and this time she had Patricia Walsh and David Kim with her. "This is your second violation," Brenda announced loudly. "You are now subject to a $1,000 fine, and if you continue, we will seek a court order to enforce compliance." "Go ahead," I said. "I look forward to explaining to a judge why you are trying to prevent me from heating my home." "You are not above the rules, Mr. Young," Patricia said. She was a thin woman with glasses who always looked like she had just smelled something unpleasant. "And the rules are not above common sense," I shot back. "You are literally trying to fine me for keeping my family warm." "You have alternatives," David said. He was younger than the others, maybe early 40s, and seemed less confident in this fight. "No, I really do not. The early morning delivery service is booked solid and costs 40% more. Switching to a different heating system would cost tens of thousands of dollars. You are being unreasonable and you know it." Brenda pulled out her phone and started taking more pictures. Mike finished the delivery and packed up quickly, clearly wanting to get out of there. I paid him and he drove off, leaving me facing the 3 board members. "The fine notice will be in your mailbox by tonight," Brenda said. "And you should know that we have contacted our attorney about seeking an injunction against further violations." "You do that," I said. "I have contacted my attorney too. See you in court." They left, and I went inside to find Olivia looking worried. "They are really going to take you to court over this? Sounds like it." "Let them. Sarah said we have a good case." The second fine notice arrived that evening as promised. This one was for $1,000 and included language about seeking legal remedies if payment was not received. I called Sarah and sent her copies of both notices. "Okay, this is getting serious," she said. "If they file for an injunction, we need to be ready to respond. I want to file a counterclaim arguing that their rule is unreasonable as applied to essential services. Whatever it takes, I am not paying these fines and I am not freezing to death to make Brenda happy." The weekend came, and the weather turned ominous. The storm was tracking right toward us, and meteorologists were predicting 2 to 3 feet of snow with wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour. The governor declared a state of emergency and advised everyone to stay home. I stocked up on food, charged all our devices, and made sure we had flashlights and batteries in case we lost power. The snow started Saturday evening, light at first but steadily increasing. By midnight it was coming down hard, thick flakes that piled up fast. I went to bed listening to the wind howl and woke up Sunday morning to a complete whiteout. I could barely see across the street. Olivia and I spent the day inside, watching movies and trying not to worry about the storm. The power flickered a few times but stayed on. The propane furnace kept the house warm and comfortable while outside the world turned into a frozen nightmare. Monday morning the snow was still falling but starting to slow down. We had at least 2.5 feet, maybe more. The road was completely impassable, buried under drifts. I was checking the weather on my phone when it rang. Tom Mercer. "Hey Isaac, have you lost power?" he asked. "No, we are good. You?" "Yeah, we are fine on power, but our propane is out. The furnace just shut off." My stomach dropped. "You ran out?" "Yeah. We were supposed to get a delivery last week, but I pushed it back because of Brenda. Figured I would wait until after the storm when maybe she would be less vigilant. Big mistake. Now we are stuck here with no heat and no way to get a delivery until the roads are clear. That could be days." "I know. And it is only going to get colder. The forecast says tonight is going to drop to 5 degrees. I thought about Linda being on the HOA board, voting against me. Now she was stuck in a freezing house because of the same stupid rule. "You guys have a fireplace?" I asked. "Yeah, but we do not have much wood, maybe enough for tonight. Let me know if you need anything. We have plenty of food if you guys get desperate." "Thanks, man. Appreciate it." I hung up and told Olivia. She looked conflicted. "That is terrible, but also Linda voted with Brenda." "I know, but I am not going to let them freeze. Nobody deserves that." About an hour later, my phone rang again. Martin Fletcher. "Isaac, I heard from Tom that you got a propane delivery right before the storm," he said. "Yeah, Friday afternoon. Why? We are out." I tried to schedule an early morning delivery for Saturday, but the service was already booked solid. I was at 30% and thought I could make it through the storm, but with this cold, I am burning through it faster than I expected. We just hit empty. You are out of heat too, completely. The house is already down to 50 degrees and dropping. My wife has asthma and the cold is aggravating it. I am worried about her. This was Martin, the vice president who had voted for me but then backed down when Brenda pushed back. Now he was suffering the consequences too. "What about Brenda?" I asked. "She has propane too, right?" "Yeah, but I just talked to her. She scheduled an early morning delivery 2 weeks ago, made sure she was topped off before the storm. She is sitting pretty while the rest of us freeze." Of course she was. "How many houses in the development use propane?" I think about 12 out of 40. "How many are out of heat?" "I know we are, the Mercers are, and I just heard from the Johnsons and the Patel family, so at least 4 houses, maybe more." I did some quick math. 8 houses with propane that were not out of heat yet, including mine. If all of them had followed the HOA rules and either skipped deliveries or scheduled them for early morning only, several more would be running low. "This is bad," I said. "I know. And there is no way to get deliveries until the roads are plowed. The state is saying it could be Tuesday or Wednesday before our area is clear. 2 or 3 more days without heat in single-digit temperatures. People were going to get seriously hurt, especially elderly residents or anyone with health issues." "Have you talked to Brenda about this?" I asked. "Yeah, she said everyone should have planned better." Martin sounded bitter. "Easy for her to say when she is warm." After I hung up, I started getting more calls. Melissa Johnson, whose husband was diabetic and needed to keep his insulin at a stable temperature. Raj Patel, who had an infant and was terrified of the cold. Emily Patterson, an elderly woman who lived alone and was already feeling sick from the dropping temperature in her house. By noon, I had counted 8 houses without heat. 8 families suffering because of an HOA rule that Brenda had insisted on enforcing. And the storm was still raging outside. I called Sarah Chen and explained the situation. "This is a disaster," she said. "People could die from exposure. Is there any way to get heat to these houses?" "Not unless the roads get plowed. And even then, the propane company has to get through their backlog of emergency deliveries from everyone else who ran out during the storm." "What about Brenda? She must realize how serious this is." Martin said she told people they should have planned better. "She has heat, so she does not care." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Isaac, if someone gets seriously hurt or dies because they could not get propane delivered due to HOA rules, that could be grounds for a major lawsuit. The HOA could be liable for damages." "Good. Maybe that will finally get their attention." But I did not want it to come to that. I did not want anyone getting hurt. I called Tom back. "How are you guys holding up?" "House is down to 40 degrees. We are wearing every piece of clothing we own and huddling under blankets." Linda is freaking out. She is already talking about trying to drive out of here to get to a hotel. The roads are not passable. You would not make it 50 feet. I know, but she is scared. We both are. I made a decision. Pack a bag. You guys are coming here. What? We have heat and space. Bring whatever you need and get over here. The walk is not that far and the snow is starting to slow down. Isaac, are you sure? Yes. Nobody should be freezing in their own home. Call the others who are out of heat and tell them they can come here too. We will figure it out. Over the next 2 hours, my house filled up with refugees from the HOA's stupidity. Tom and Linda Mercer arrived first, hauling backpacks through the snow. Then Martin Fletcher and his wife Susan, who was wrapped in scarves and breathing heavily. Melissa and Robert Johnson came with their medical supplies. Raj and Priya Patel arrived carrying their 6-month-old daughter wrapped in what looked like an entire closet worth of blankets. Emily Patterson was the last to arrive. She was 78 years old and had insisted on walking over by herself despite offers of help. When she came through the door, her lips were blue and she was shaking uncontrollably. Olivia immediately wrapped her in blankets and sat her in front of the fireplace we had going for extra warmth. You should not have walked over alone, Olivia scolded gently. I am not helpless, dear, Emily said through chattering teeth, though I am very grateful for the warmth. My house was packed with 11 people now, but everyone was safe and warm. Olivia and I made hot soup and coffee while people thawed out. The mood was a strange mix of relief and anger. I cannot believe it came to this, Linda said. She had been crying, her face red and puffy. We are on the HOA board. We are supposed to be helping people, not making their lives harder. You voted with Brenda, I pointed out, trying to keep my voice neutral. I know. I was wrong. I am so sorry, Isaac. I was trying to keep the peace to not rock the boat, but this is insane. We could have died in our house because I was too afraid to stand up to Brenda. What is her problem anyway? Raj asked. He was sitting on the floor with his wife and baby, all of them wrapped in one huge blanket. Why is she so obsessed with these rules? Power, Martin said. She loves being in charge, loves having authority over people. The HOA presidency is the biggest power trip she has ever had. Someone needs to stop her, Susan said. This has gone too far. My phone rang. I looked at the screen and almost laughed. It was Brenda. Hello. Isaac, I have been hearing that you are harboring multiple families at your residence. Her voice was as cold as the storm outside. Harboring? They are not fugitives, Brenda. They are neighbors who ran out of heat because of your stupid rule. The HOA regulations clearly state that homes are not to be used for commercial purposes. If you are running some kind of shelter or boarding house, are you serious right now? People are freezing and you are worried about HOA regulations. Rules are rules. And I have been informed that there are currently multiple vehicles parked in your driveway and on the street in front of your house, which is also a violation of our parking ordinances. I walked to the window and looked out. Sure enough, several of my neighbors had driven their cars the short distance to my house before the roads became completely impassable, and they were now buried in snow in front of my property. Brenda, there is a state of emergency. Nobody can move those cars even if they wanted to. The roads are not plowed. That is not my concern. I am documenting these violations and you will be receiving fine notices for each one. You know what? Fine me. Fine me for all of it. And when we are done here, I am going to sue you and the HOA for every penny you are worth. You created this situation. You forced people to risk running out of heat during a blizzard because of your petty power trip. If anyone had died, you would be looking at criminal charges. How dare you threaten me? It is not a threat, it is a fact. I have 8 families in my house right now who are here because of you. 8 families who followed your rules and now have no heat. You did this, Brenda, and you are going to pay for it." I hung up on her. Everyone was staring at me. "She is threatening to fine you for helping us." Melissa asked, incredulous. "Of course she is. That is what she does." Tom stood up. "That is it. I am calling an emergency board meeting. We need to remove Brenda as president and change these rules before someone really does get hurt. Can you do that? Call an emergency meeting during a storm?" I asked. "The bylaws allow for emergency meetings in crisis situations, and this definitely qualifies. Linda, you are with me on this, right?" Linda nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. Brenda needs to go. Martin? Hell yes, I am done with her." "That is 3 board members," Tom said. "We need at least 4 to remove a president. Patricia and David are the wild cards." "Patricia lives in Florida for the winter," Linda said. "She just does the meetings by video call, but her house here has electric heat, so she is not affected by any of this." "What about David?" I asked. "David has propane," Martin said slowly, "and I do not think he got a delivery before the storm. We tried calling David but got no answer. Tom and Martin volunteered to go check on him." They bundled up and headed back out into the storm, which had finally stopped dumping snow but was now just bitterly cold and windy. They came back 20 minutes later with David Kim and his wife Jennifer, both of them looking miserable and half frozen. "We ran out of heat last night," David said, accepting a cup of hot coffee from Olivia. "We have been sleeping in our car running the engine for warmth, but we were almost out of gas." "Why did you not come here with the others?" I asked. David looked ashamed. "Because I voted against you. I knew you would not want to help me after that." "Nobody deserves to freeze, David, not even people who make bad choices on HOA boards," he laughed weakly. "Fair point. Look, I am sorry. Brenda pressured me hard to vote her way. She implied she would make things difficult for me if I did not. But she created this mess, and I am done following her lead. Whatever you guys are planning, I am in." Tom explained about calling an emergency board meeting to remove Brenda as president. David agreed immediately. "That is 4 votes," Tom said. "Enough to do it." "I am calling the meeting for tomorrow." "Tomorrow? The roads will not even be plowed by then," Linda protested. "We can do it by video conference. The bylaws allow it in emergency situations. I will send out the notice tonight." Over the next few hours, Tom drafted the meeting notice and agenda while the rest of us tried to make the best of the crowded situation. Olivia and I set up sleeping arrangements throughout the house. The Patels got our guest bedroom with the baby. Emily got the other guest room. Everyone else got couches, air mattresses, and sleeping bags scattered through the living room and den. It was chaotic and cramped, but it was warm. And as I looked around at all these people who had been failed by their own HOA, I felt a fierce determination to make sure this never happened again. That night, everyone's phones dinged simultaneously. Tom had sent out the emergency meeting notice. The meeting was scheduled for the following day at 7 p.m. to be conducted via video conference. The agenda had one item: vote to remove Brenda Carmichael as HOA president and appoint interim leadership pending new elections. My phone rang almost immediately. Brenda again. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times before finally giving up and sending a text message instead. "This meeting is illegal and I will not recognize it. Any votes taken will be null and void." Tom texted back from his phone. "The meeting is being conducted in accordance with HOA Bylaws Section 18, Emergency Procedures. Your recognition is not required. Please plan to attend or you will be absent for the vote." Brenda did not respond to that. The next day was a strange limbo. The storm had passed, but the aftermath was severe. We had over 30 inches of snow, power was out in several parts of town, and the roads were still unpassable. The news was full of stories about the storm's impact. Several people had died across Vermont, mostly from exposure or carbon monoxide poisoning from running generators in enclosed spaces. Inside my house, 11 extra people were going stir-crazy, but at least they were safe. We played board games, watched movies, and tried not to get on each other's nerves. The Patel baby cried a lot, and Emily's health was concerning. She had developed a cough that sounded bad, and Susan, who was a retired nurse, was keeping a close eye on her. "She needs to see a doctor," Susan told me quietly. "That cough could turn into pneumonia." "As soon as the roads are clear, we will get her help," I promised. At 7 p.m., everyone gathered around my laptop for the emergency HOA meeting. Tom had set up a video conference and invited all 5 board members plus me as an affected resident. Patricia called in from Florida, her video showing her sitting on a sunny patio while the rest of us were trapped in a winter hellscape. "Can someone explain what is going on?" she asked. "I am very confused about this emergency meeting." Tom explained the situation, laying out how the commercial vehicle ban had prevented residents from getting propane deliveries before the storm, leaving 8 houses without heat in dangerous conditions. "We have people who could have died because of HOA rules that Brenda insisted on enforcing," Tom said. "This is a crisis of leadership and we need to act." Brenda's video came on. She was sitting in what looked like her home office, looking perfectly put together and completely unconcerned. "This is a ridiculous overreaction," she said. "The commercial vehicle policy is clearly stated in our regulations. Anyone who ran out of propane during the storm simply failed to plan appropriately." "Brenda, they could not get deliveries because of your enforcement of the rules," Martin said, his voice tight with anger. "You threatened $500 fines for having a propane truck in the driveway. People either had to pay exorbitant fees for early morning delivery or risk running out. And then we got hit with a major storm. That is not my fault. Weather happens. People need to be prepared." "We were prepared," Linda said, her voice rising. "We were ready to get a delivery, but you made it impossible." Tom and I nearly froze in our own home because I was too afraid to stand up to you. "You understand how insane that is." "You are being hysterical," Brenda said dismissively. "Everyone is fine. Nobody died. This does not warrant an emergency meeting or any changes to leadership." 8 families had to evacuate to Isaac's house, Tom said. "Emily Patterson is sick and may have pneumonia. The Patels have a 6-month-old baby who was at risk of hypothermia." "Brenda, you created a dangerous situation through rigid enforcement of a rule that should never have applied to essential services in the first place." "I disagree, and I am calling for this meeting to be adjourned. It is improperly noticed, and the agenda is outside the scope of emergency procedures." "Actually, it is not," came a new voice on the call. Sarah Chen, my attorney, had been invited by Tom as a legal advisor. "I have reviewed your bylaws. Emergency meetings can be called by any 3 board members in crisis situations, which this clearly is. And the scope of the meeting can include any business related to the crisis, including leadership changes. The meeting is properly constituted, and the agenda is valid." Brenda glared at the screen. "Who are you?" Sarah Chen, attorney for Isaac Young and now retained by board members Tom Mercer, Linda Mercer, Martin Fletcher, and David Kim to advise on this matter. "This is a witch hunt," Brenda snapped. "This is accountability," Tom said. "And we are done letting you run this HOA like your personal fiefdom. I am calling for a vote. All in favor of removing Brenda Carmichael as HOA president effective immediately?" "I vote yes," Linda said. "Yes," Martin said. "Absolutely yes," David said. "Wait," Patricia said. I am not sure I understand what happened. Can someone explain again? Tom patiently walked through the whole situation again. Patricia listened, her expression growing more concerned. So let me get this straight, she said. Brenda prevented people from getting propane deliveries, which caused them to run out of heat during a blizzard, and now she is saying it is their fault for not planning better. That is exactly what happened, Tom confirmed. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then yes, I vote to remove her. I live in Florida most of the year, but I still own property in Pinewood Estates. If something like this happened while I was up there, I could have been one of the people without heat. This is unacceptable. That is 5 votes, Tom said. Brenda Carmichael, you are hereby removed as HOA president. The board will appoint an interim president to serve until the next election. Brenda's face was bright red. This is illegal, and I will be contacting my attorney. You cannot remove me for enforcing the rules. We just did, Martin said. And I am moving that we suspend the commercial vehicle policy as it applies to essential services, including but not limited to propane delivery, heating oil, septic services, and well maintenance. All in favor? 5 hands went up on the video screen. Everyone except Brenda. Motion passes, Tom said. Isaac, effective immediately, you are authorized to have propane deliveries without restriction, and all fines previously levied against you are rescinded. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thank you. We also need to address the current crisis, Linda said. We have multiple families without heat and roads that are still not passable. What is the plan? I have been in contact with the propane company, I said. They are prioritizing emergency deliveries as soon as the roads are clear, which should be tomorrow according to the state. They said they will try to get to everyone who ran out by tomorrow evening. What about tonight? Susan asked. We cannot all stay at Isaac's house forever. Actually, you are welcome to stay as long as you need, Olivia said. We have heat and food, and no one should have to go back to a freezing house. Emily started coughing again, a deep rattling sound that made everyone wince. Susan went over to check on her. Her fever is higher, Susan announced. She really needs to see a doctor. I will call 911, I said, pulling out my phone. Wait, Emily said weakly. The ambulance will not be able to get here in this snow. She was probably right. I called anyway. The dispatcher said they would send someone as soon as possible, but they had multiple emergency calls backed up and the roads were still difficult. It could be several hours, she said. Is the patient in immediate danger? Susan took the phone. This is Susan Fletcher, registered nurse. Patient is a 78-year-old female with fever and productive cough, likely pneumonia. She is stable for now but needs medical attention soon. We will get there as soon as we can, the dispatcher promised. The ambulance arrived 3 hours later, the crew exhausted from responding to storm-related emergencies all day. They checked Emily and confirmed Susan's diagnosis. She needed to go to the hospital. I am riding with her, Susan announced. Me too, Olivia said. They left with Emily, and the rest of us settled in for another night. The mood was somber. Emily getting sick had reminded everyone how serious this situation was. The next morning, the sun came out for the first time in days. The roads were still snow-covered, but plows had finally started making their way through the development. I got a call from the propane company confirming they would deliver to all the houses that had run out, starting around noon. One by one, my house guests started leaving as their heat was restored. Tom and Linda were first, thanking us profusely. Martin and Susan came back from the hospital with good news. Emily would be fine. They had her on antibiotics and were keeping her for observation. By evening, everyone was gone except the Patels, who were waiting for the last delivery. When their propane truck finally arrived, Raj actually cried with relief. "Thank you," he said, shaking my hand. "You saved my family. I will never forget that." "Just be glad we are all okay," I said. After they left, Olivia and I collapsed on the couch. The house felt enormous and quiet after being packed with people for 2 days. "That was intense," she said. "Yeah, but at least the HOA situation is resolved." "Is it though? Brenda is not going to just go away." She was right. Over the next few days, Brenda started a campaign to overturn her removal. She sent emails to all the residents claiming the emergency meeting was illegitimate. She posted in the community Facebook group about how she was being persecuted for following the rules. She even showed up at my house one afternoon demanding to talk. "You orchestrated this whole thing," she accused when I opened the door. "You deliberately created a crisis to get me removed." "I created a crisis. Brenda, you are the one who threatened to fine me for heating my house. You forced people to risk running out of propane during a blizzard. This is entirely on you. I was following the rules. The rules were wrong and you refused to see it. 8 families suffered because of your stubbornness. Emily Patterson almost died. She has pneumonia. That is not my fault." She got pneumonia because she was sitting in a freezing house for 12 hours before coming to my place. A house that was freezing because you would not let her get a propane delivery without threatening massive fines. So yeah, Brenda, that is on you. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "I am done debating this with you. The board voted, you were removed, and that is final. If you do not like it, take it up with your lawyer." I closed the door in her face. True to her word, Brenda did contact a lawyer. 2 weeks later, the HOA received notice that she was suing to be reinstated as president and seeking damages for what she claimed was an improper removal. Sarah Chen reviewed the lawsuit and basically laughed. "She has no case," Sarah said. "The removal was done properly according to your bylaws. And given what happened, any judge is going to side with the board. This is a nuisance suit." "What do we do?" Tom asked. He had been appointed interim president and was taking his responsibilities seriously. "We respond through our attorney and we counterclaim," Sarah said. "The HOA should sue Brenda for creating a dangerous situation through negligent enforcement of rules. You may not win, but it will make her think twice about pushing this." The HOA board voted to authorize the counterclaim. Things got ugly fast. Brenda started showing up at board meetings to yell at people. She sent certified letters demanding things. She filed complaints with the town about various imagined violations. Meanwhile, the board was working on revising the HOA rules. They appointed a committee to review all regulations and recommend changes. I was asked to serve on it, along with several other residents who had been affected by the propane situation. We spent 2 months going through the rules line by line, identifying ones that were overly restrictive or that prioritized aesthetics over practicality. The commercial vehicle policy was completely rewritten to explicitly allow temporary deliveries of essential services. We also added language requiring the board to consider reasonable exceptions before enforcing rules that would create hardship. In March, the revised rules were presented to the full HOA membership for a vote. They passed with 92% approval. Brenda was one of the few no votes, showing up at the meeting to argue that we were destroying property values and turning Pinewood Estates into a free-for-all. "Next thing you know, people will be parking RVs in their driveways and running businesses out of their garages," she ranted. "Or they will just be able to heat their homes without being threatened with fines," Linda shot back, "which seems like a reasonable priority." The meeting ended with Brenda storming out and the rest of us feeling like we had actually accomplished something good. In April, Brenda's lawsuit was dismissed. The judge ruled that the board had acted properly and within their authority. He also noted in his opinion that HOA regulations must be balanced against basic health and safety needs, and that rigid enforcement of rules that create dangerous situations could expose the HOA to liability. Brenda was ordered to pay the HOA's legal fees, which came to about $15,000. She filed an appeal, but her lawyer eventually convinced her to drop it. In May, the HOA held elections for new board members. Tom ran for president and won easily. Linda, Martin, and David all kept their seats. Patricia retired from the board, saying the drama was too much. Emily Patterson, fully recovered from her pneumonia, ran for the open seat and won. Brenda ran for a position but received only 3 votes out of 40 households. After the election results were announced at the annual meeting, Brenda stood up and addressed the room one last time. "You are all making a huge mistake," she said. "Without proper standards and enforcement, this community will fall apart. Property values will plummet. Pinewood Estates will become a laughingstock, and when it happens, do not come crying to me." She left the meeting and we never saw her at another HOA event again. According to rumors, she listed her house for sale in June and moved out by August. As for me, I continued getting my propane deliveries without incident. The new rules worked exactly as intended. Delivery trucks came and went, spending their 20 minutes doing their job, and then life went on. Property values did not plummet. The community did not fall apart. In fact, most people said the neighborhood felt friendlier and more relaxed without Brenda constantly looking for violations. On the 1-year anniversary of the storm, Tom organized a community dinner at the clubhouse. Everyone who had been affected by the propane crisis was there, along with most of the other residents. We shared food and stories and laughed about how crazy that winter had been. "To Isaac," Tom said, raising his glass, "who stood up to tyranny and opened his home when people needed help. And to common sense, which finally prevailed." Everyone cheered and drank. I looked around at all these people who had become real friends rather than just neighbors, and felt grateful that we had come through the whole mess intact. Later that evening, Olivia and I walked home through the warm summer night, so different from that freezing February when everything had gone wrong. "Do you regret buying here?" she asked. I thought about it. "No, I mean, the Brenda situation was terrible, but it led to real change. The HOA is better now. The community is stronger, and we learned that most people are reasonable when they are not being bullied into following bad rules. Plus, you are a local hero now, the guy who stood up to the evil HOA president." I laughed. "I do not know about hero, but yeah, it feels good to have made a difference." We reached our house, warm and welcoming in the twilight. The propane tank sat beside it, that simple metal cylinder that had caused so much trouble. I had gotten another delivery just the week before, the truck pulling into my driveway in broad daylight without any drama whatsoever. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said to Olivia. "Brenda was so worried about commercial vehicles ruining the aesthetics of the neighborhood. But now that we are allowed to have them, I barely even notice them anymore. They come, they do their job, they leave. It is like they were never a problem at all." "Because they were not a problem," Olivia said. "The problem was someone who cared more about control than about people." She was right. The whole crisis had never been about propane or commercial vehicles or property values. It had been about power and what happens when someone gets a little bit of authority and forgets that rules should serve people, not the other way around. Inside our warm house, I checked the propane gauge out of habit. 75% full. More than enough to last through the summer and well into next winter. By the time I needed another delivery, it would be routine and boring, exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Board meeting next Tuesday. Want to join us as an observer? We are discussing the fall festival planning. I texted back that I would be there. The HOA still had meetings and rules and all the usual stuff that comes with living in a managed community. But now it felt like something I was part of rather than something being done to me. That night, as Olivia and I got ready for bed, I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The confrontations with Brenda, the desperate scramble during the storm, the terrifying moment when Emily had gotten so sick, the legal battles, and finally the changes that had made Pinewood Estates a better place to live. It had been exhausting and stressful, and at times genuinely frightening. But it had also been worth it, because now when I saw my neighbors, I saw people who had stood together when it mattered. Tom and Linda, who had finally stood up to Brenda. Martin and Susan, who had helped care for Emily. The Patels, who had trusted me with their baby's safety. Emily herself, tough as nails even at 78. And all the others who had voted for change when given the chance. A community is not just houses arranged on streets. It is people choosing to care about each other, to fight for what is right even when it is hard, and to prioritize common sense over arbitrary rules. We had almost lost that during the winter storm. But in the end, we had found it again. The next morning I woke up to a beautiful day. I made coffee and went out to my deck to enjoy the sunshine. From there, I could see several neighbors out walking, kids riding bikes, someone washing their car in their driveway. Normal life in a normal neighborhood. A propane delivery truck drove past, heading to someone else's house. I watched it disappear around the corner without incident, just another service vehicle doing its job. No drama, no fines, no crisis. Exactly the way it should have been all along. My phone rang. It was Sarah Chen. "Hey Isaac, just wanted to give you some closure on everything. The final paperwork went through. All your fines have been officially expunged from HOA records and Brenda's appeal was formally withdrawn. You are completely clear." "That is great news. Thank you for everything, Sarah. I could not have done this without you. You are the one who stood your ground when it mattered. I just provided legal backup. Take care, Isaac." After hanging up, I sat there for a while longer, enjoying the peace. Olivia came out with her own coffee and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just how different things are now compared to a year ago. How much better." "You think Brenda ever realized she was wrong?" I considered that. Honestly, probably not. People like her rarely do. They are so convinced of their own righteousness that they cannot see the harm they cause. But it does not matter anymore. She is gone and we are here and life is good. "Life is good," Olivia agreed, leaning against my shoulder. We sat there together as the morning warmed up, watching our neighborhood come to life. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the distinctive sound of a propane delivery truck making its rounds. A sound that once would have filled me with dread, and now just blended into the background noise of daily life. It was funny how something so simple had caused so much trouble. But maybe that was the lesson in all of this. The biggest problems often come not from actual dangers or real threats, but from people who cannot tell the difference between important rules and pointless restrictions. From those who value control over compassion, uniformity over common sense. Brenda had been so certain that maintaining standards was worth any cost. She had been willing to let people freeze rather than admit that maybe, just maybe, some rules needed to be applied with flexibility and humanity. And in the end, that rigidity had cost her everything. Her position, her reputation, her place in the community she had claimed to be protecting. Meanwhile, the rest of us had learned to work together, to stand up for what was right, and to build something better from the ashes of her failed leadership. That felt like a victory worth celebrating. The summer passed peacefully. I worked from home, enjoyed the weather, and attended HOA meetings where we discussed normal things like landscaping and social events, rather than feuding over ridiculous restrictions. The fall festival that Tom's text had mentioned turned out to be a huge success, with dozens of families showing up to enjoy food, games, and community. Winter came again, but this time I was ready. My propane tank was full, the delivery schedule was set, and there was no question about whether I would be able to keep my house warm. When the first big snowstorm hit in December, I watched it from my comfortable living room, secure in the knowledge that we were prepared. On Christmas Eve, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Emily Patterson standing there with a plate of cookies. "Merry Christmas, Isaac," she said with a warm smile. "I wanted to thank you again for saving my life last winter." "You would have been fine," I said, though we both knew that was not necessarily true. Maybe. Or maybe I would have died of pneumonia in my freezing house because I was too stubborn to ask for help sooner. Either way, you opened your home to all of us when we needed it most. That is not something I will forget. She handed me the cookies and gave me a quick hug before heading back to her house. I watched her go, this tough elderly woman who had walked through a blizzard rather than admit she needed help, and felt grateful that she had made it through. That night, Olivia and I sat by our fireplace with the propane furnace humming quietly in the background, both systems working together to keep us warm and safe. Outside, snow fell gently, beautiful and peaceful rather than threatening. "You know what I am grateful for this year?" Olivia asked. "What is that?" "That we live somewhere where people actually care about each other, where the community came together when it mattered, where common sense won out over stubbornness." "Me too," I said, "though it took a pretty big crisis to get there. Sometimes that is what it takes." But we got there, and that is what counts. She was right. The crisis with Brenda and the propane deliveries and the winter storm had been terrible while it was happening, but it had forced the community to confront problems that had been simmering under the surface. It had exposed the flaws in the HOA system and given people the motivation to fix them. And in the end, Pinewood Estates was a better place because of it. As the new year arrived and life continued its normal rhythm, I found myself thinking less and less about the whole saga. It became just a story we told occasionally. The time the HOA president tried to ban propane deliveries and ended up getting removed from office. New residents would hear it and shake their heads in disbelief. Older residents would laugh and add their own details. But mostly, we all just lived our lives. We got our propane and oil and septic services delivered without drama. We followed reasonable rules and ignored unreasonable ones. We showed up at HOA meetings when we felt like it and skipped them when we did not. We were neighbors and friends rather than adversaries. And if occasionally a delivery truck lingered a bit longer than strictly necessary in someone's driveway, or if someone bent a rule that did not really matter anyway, nobody said a word. Because we had all learned the hard way what happens when people care more about regulations than about the humans those regulations supposedly serve. Years later, when people would ask me about living in an HOA community, I would tell them about that winter, about Brenda and her rigid enforcement, about 8 families huddled in my house during a blizzard, about Emily Patterson coughing in front of my fireplace and the Patel baby crying in my guest room, about the emergency board meeting that changed everything. And I would tell them that HOAs can work, but only when run by people who remember that communities are made of humans, not just properties. That rules should serve the residents, not the other way around. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand up and say no when authority becomes unreasonable. My propane tank sits beside my house today, regularly filled by a delivery truck that pulls right up to it in broad daylight. Every time I see it, I remember what it took to earn that simple right, and I am grateful for the community that came together to make it possible. That is the story of how my HOA banned propane deliveries, how people nearly froze during a winter storm, and how common sense finally prevailed. It was not easy and it was not fun while it was happening, but in the end, it made us stronger, and my house stayed warm.